everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. I am looking around the room, and some of my favorite people are here, and I'm so touched in my heart that you all came here tonight to be here with us in this amazing endeavor that Will and I decided to take on a couple of months ago. And I have loved getting to know all of you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. So I hope what I want to do tonight is I want you to learn a little bit about our last mistakes. But I do want us to take a good deal of time towards the end, at least half the class, to talk about specifically what you learned on this little 6-week journey. I know not everybody was here every single week. That doesn't matter. But something that you can think about while we're doing this class, like what are some takeaways that you have from this little journey we have? And it could have been something that happened in between the classes. I'll give you an example. My husband, Jeff, and I were in Chautauqua, and we were sitting by a little pond, and we heard some frogs. And I don't know who was here for the Thomas Martin class. Who was here for the Thomas Martin class? Do you remember the frog discussion about frogs just being present, and they just kind of leap around and they're present and just noticing things in nature, like a frog leaping in a pond brings you to the present. Well, that actually happened with me and Jeff in the very moment. We said, oh my gosh, this is just like the Thomas Martin class. So I feel like that was such a cool moment that we had, that we couldn't have had and wouldn't have had if it wasn't for this class and the teachings that we've experienced together. So I'd love to hear from you in the second half of the class. What particularly stood out for you? What you're taking with you? What's integrated in your life? Have you incorporated some of these meditations? I have brought them back into my life, and it's been amazing because I took a little hiatus for a while. So this is not only this helped me as well. So I appreciate sometimes when you teach a class, you learn even more. So it's kind of got this class has put me back on track in my contemplative walk. So I am really grateful for it. Will is an amazing teacher. I'm grateful to have this experience, and I'm grateful for all of you for showing up and making it a robust discussion. This is a very cool crowd. And like I said, every week it's a little different, but for the most part, we have our core group. And I'm just so excited to hear from you and hear what Will has to say about some of the mystics tonight. And then also maybe how we can move forward, how we'd like to move forward, and some of your comments on that. So that's what we hope to accomplish. In the meantime, we have that charcuterie board outside. If anybody's hungry, feel free to get some food. I know it's, it gets late after Qigong and being here, people get hungry. So that's why we provide that for you all. And I'm just grateful to have you here. But I want to turn some attention now over to Dr. Will Ellis.
Thank you. Well, I want to give a hearty second to what Erica just said. It's been a privilege hanging out with you guys and learning together. You can't really go wrong with these mystics. Including frogs jumping into ponds. So I thought we would start with a little bell moment of silence. I'll share a few things about Marguerite Perret, back by popular demand from last week, unexpectedly, but and then a little bit about Saint Teresa of Ávila. And I would like to do a little guided meditation because the actual practice, experiential practice, is really the heart of a contemplative life. Practice meaning formal meditations, but the experiential practice of being engaged with our brothers and sisters in day-to-day life. That's the practice. And then for sure, since it's our last gathering for the 6-session series, I want there to be plenty of time for conversation. Yeah. Let me just ask, did we ever do a little meditation on the image of God being a sphere that's infinite? Did we do anything like this?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was trying to save it for the end, but sometimes I love it so much it slips out. So I wondered if maybe I spontaneously went into it in some of our improvisation. We'll do that. All right. So I'll ring the bell, we'll have a moment of silence, and here's the invitation. To really, as the bell rings, hear the silence of the bell. The silence at the heart of the bell, the ringing. And then when it gets quiet, hear the silence when the bell's not ringing. And then when the bell rings again, hear the silence coming up as the ringing of the bell. The silence that's really at the heart of everything. The silence that is at the heart of every sound, every interaction, of every relationship. So, a moment of silence. So that's 1 minute of silence. And there's a really mysterious and wondrous thing about our life is that the important things, the really important things, can't really be said fully. When it comes down to spiritual experience or trauma or love, no words are sufficient. People who go through trauma, they say, there's no way I can share this. No one will understand. Two people who really love each other know that when they say, I love you, then that love is still way deeper than those words. Wow. Spiritual experience is the same way. We're going to hear a few tonight from the mystics. And yet, and here's what's even more mysterious, that the saying things to a trusted other is actually the embodiment of what cannot be said. It's the enactment of what cannot be said. And it's so crucially important to find one or two or a few people to be able to share what feels unshareable. Makes a huge difference in our life. Because we're not ever really alone. We're not ever really small skin-bounded selves. But we can feel that way. Alone, isolated, disconnected. Disconnected from each other, from community, from nature, from the great mystery that sometimes we name God with the Christian mystics. We really need to bring into words what feels like we cannot share. So when I share in these gatherings, I'm doing my best to not intrude upon or interrupt the silence that we feel after the bell rings. To do my best to let that silence come up as a few words that might touch people. That's the invitation, not just in groups like this, but in real conversation with each other. And the mystics point the way. So I'm sharing this to say, it's so on this last session that we're gathered together for this series, it's so crucially important to find a community. That's crucial. It's important to find your practice or practices. Like, what are the core practices that really make a difference for you? Maybe centering prayer, maybe silent meditation, maybe Lectio Divina. There's countless other practices. Rumi, the Sufi mystic, says there's hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Right? But you find the practices that speak to your heart and stay with them for a while. You may change later. Give them a try. So find your community, find your practice, and find a teacher. This makes a huge difference. Find someone that you can say what can't be said, and they will listen without judging, without blaming, and someone that's familiar with the territory. That they can welcome conversation about what really matters the most. Okay. Yeah. So, all three of these have been profoundly important for me. I practiced meditation for many years before a teacher fell into my life 27 years ago, and it's made all the difference. And to have a community that supports and understands, and to have daily practices makes a huge difference. So as much as we talk about the mystics, the experiential side is what's crucial. I'm going to share this quickly now because I don't want to do it at the end because it's less important. But I just want to name Jim Finley's Christian meditation book again. What an amazing teacher. Jim Finley, who was a monk under Thomas Merton in the monastery. I'm not going to pass it around because I don't want to focus on book. Bernard McGinn is a major writer on Christian mysticism, and he has a little anthology of the essential writings of Christian mystics. There's lots of wonderful books. I also remembered one by Matthew Fox, which is similar to this, on Christian mystics. We celebrated Thomas Merton. If you want to go to an original text, although these are original text, McGinn's is, well, Finley's is as well. He's a living mystic, Finley. But McGinn's gives you the actual text of the mystics, but in short sections. Well, Thomas Merton, my favorite book by him is New Seeds of Contemplation. It's just an awesome book. We worked with some of these passages. Just for what it's worth, I don't want to put myself in the territory of these wonderful folks, but a lot of what I've shared in what I've offered here, I wrote about in my book, A Wild and Sacred Call. And there's a whole chapter on Christian mysticism in this book that addresses a lot of what we've been exploring. And then Christian mysticism is woven all throughout. So just
wow, well, you're full of surprises. Goodness, I didn't know that. Maybe we should do a whole book club on that. We could talk about that. I only brought one book. We didn't even talk about bringing books, but I brought this book, Sacred Companions, because I think a lot of what we have been talking about is finding somebody in your life or more than one person to do this journey with. It's very good to have deep spiritual companions. I have a few people in this classroom who are sitting here who I would actually consider my spiritual companion. John's one of them. Brandon, Jeff. I am so grateful for my spiritual companions. And I think it's a blessed thing to have somebody to walk through with and be able to talk about your spiritual journey. And you don't have to be a professional. This is just people who you take a walk, you say, here's what's going on in my life, here's what's happening with my relationship with God and how the divine and how I'm feeling that the divine's working in my life or what I need to do more. And it's a very special friendship very sacred. And this is something that this book, if you're interested, it's something I read. I just maybe that was good.
That's great. Isn't it great to have other mindfulness spells, other kinds of mindfulness? Thank you. It's just a moment down. There are lots of it. All right, so if you're willing here, I'll share a little bit about Marguerite Perret and Saint Teresa, and Eric is going to join in on Saint Teresa. Okay. So as a prelude, I wanted to invoke this core teaching from the Christian tradition. Really, it's the core teaching of all traditions, and that is to say, God is love. From the book of John. And when Christ was asked, what's the most important commandment of all? Christ said, God is one, and we shall love God with all our mind and heart and soul, and love our neighbor as ourselves. And I'm glad that he put both of these in, love God and love our neighbor. Because this question of what does it mean to really love God is not so easy to get clear about. Because what in the world is God? And Saint Teresa of Ávila, who I'll speak about in a moment, said, perhaps we do not know not only what God is, but perhaps we don't know what love is. Perhaps we don't know what love is. And I think that's the core spiritual question, not to answer intellectually, but answer through our living. What is love? How do I embody that and enact that? And this is what Marguerite Perret did. I'll be brief here because I shared a little bit last week, but just spontaneously, without planning it, I mentioned Marguerite Perret because she was a contemporary of Meister Eckhart in France, and we worked with Meister Eckhart last week. And Meister Eckhart is way more famous than Marguerite Perret, but they lived at the same time. Eckhart was from Germany, but he was in France holding the chair of religion that Thomas Aquinas held. And they didn't know each other, but it's pretty clear that he knew of her writings and they influenced him. No one's absolutely certain about this, but it's pretty clear. I won't go into the history, but Marguerite Perret was a Beguine mystic who was, the Beguines were mostly women that lived in small communities that were devoted to religious service of the poor and needy. They weren't nuns, but they were kind of in between a layperson and a nun. Okay. I shared last week that her writings that came out in a book called The Mirror of Simple Souls, The Mirror of Simple Souls, her writings were condemned as heretical, and she did not recant because she was trusting in the clarity of her heart and the clarity of her vision. And so she was arrested by the inquisitors, condemned as a heretic, and burned alive in a square in Paris in 1310 with a crown. All right. She came up last week because someone said, I can't remember if it was Holly or whoever said, if a woman had said some of the things that Eckhart had said, she'd be killed. And I said, well, it happened. Tragically happened. She was a deep contemplative, and witnesses of her execution said that she was absolutely centered and still and peaceful as she was being burned alive. That's what St. Paul means when he says the peace that surpasses all understanding. Now, I don't want to overly valorize that response, because she could have been just as clear, just as deep, just as open, and screaming and wailing when she's being burned alive. Because I can't even imagine what it's to be burned alive. But it is a testimony to her contemplative practice. And it's just a reminder that this isn't just, let's relax and find a little sweetness, which is plenty wonderful as far as relaxation and sweetness goes. I'm all for it, actually. But these practices go way deeper than that. We take them to heart. So I wanted to share just a couple of passages from Marguerite Perret, and time's running a little short. I think I'm going to skip a little bit.
Is there an extra coffee? I didn't get one.
Oh yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Appreciate that.
There you go, Jane. I'll just pick and choose here. I'm not going to do all of this. So for Marguerite Perret, love was one of her names of the great unnameable mystery, one of the names of God. Fire was one of the names that she used. Okay. And she sets up this conversation between the soul, her own unique individual soul, and reason, which is like our habits, our conventions, our defenses, our ego self, you might say. And so the soul says to, this is love speaking. Love says, I am God, says love. For love is God and God is love. And this soul, me, this soul is God by the condition of love. Between him and the soul, through transformation by love, there's no difference. Love accomplishes this in the soul. God accomplishes this in the soul. Love accomplishes this in the soul. Love, which is God, love has transformed this soul into love herself. Love has transformed my soul into love. That's her practice. Now, she wrote this book when she knew people were being arrested and accused of heresy. A lot of women. And she knew people were being burned at the stake. So here's what she says, continuing on. I am God, says love. Wait. Oh yeah, I duplicated this, but I'll just skip the part that I was going to duplicate. Okay. So she said, love has transformed the soul into love itself. Such a soul is so inflamed in the furnace of the fire of love that she has become properly fire, which is why she feels no fire. That is, no fire separate from herself. For she is the fire. Remember, fire is the name of God, and love is the name of God. For she is fire in herself through the power of love, who transforms her into the fire of love. She wrote this knowing she's probably going to be burned at the stake. And they arrested her, and she didn't recant. I see it's great to find spiritual teachers. What a blessing that Marguerite Perret can speak to us across, what, 800 years.
And risked her life and gave her life for
Gave her-
these teachings.
Gave her life. It feels almost irreverent to say anything else. It's almost like we should just sit in silence and have that be the end. But we did promise Saint Teresa, and we even promised Saint John of the Cross, which is like impossible.
I just want to say, like, Saint John and Saint Teresa deserve like their own class. So maybe do this in those in a Southern mystic class.
Yeah,
Say that.
I'm with you, Erica. I mean, any of these mystics deserve their whole 6-session or 6-month series. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's we've like barely dipping our toes in.
I think what you just said is beautiful. I love Saint Teresa of Ávila, and I think that I would highly recommend anybody who is interested in this journey to look at some of her writings. And she is such an amazing mystic, and she was actually revered by the church. They made her. She lived in the 1500s, and she was also during the Spanish Inquisition. She was also a Spanish nun. She was she actually grew up in a wealthy family, and then ended up going to a nunnery, which the first one she went to wasn't austere. It was like, and when she went there, she was very into studying about mystics, and she became in love with that route and had beautiful contemplative practice to the point of, has anybody ever seen the picture? You have the picture up over, but to the point of where she looks like she's in ecstasy. Has anybody ever seen that picture of Saint Teresa? She's just looking, her eyes gazing up at God, and she just is in ecstasy, like, and it's like, wow, what is she doing? But she also had, her whole life was devoted to him, and she was such an amazing
I'll pass this around while
Yeah.
Eric is talking. This is a really famous sculpture by the Italian sculptor Bernini. It's called the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa.
Mhm.
And as Erica's talking, I would say, pass it fairly quickly so everyone can see. But
Yeah.
but look at her face, her facial expression. And I would say also look at where the arrow from the angel is pointing.
So Saint Teresa dedicated her life to a contemplative lifestyle, and she taught others to do the same. She wrote books. She wrote incredible books on mysticism and how to. The Interior Castle was one of her biggest writings, and teaches people actually like a step by step. Julie, are you familiar with it? It's a step by step way how to enter each of these rooms. It's almost like a mansion, and each room, this is how you pray, then it's how you go deeper, this is how you get to this level of bliss. And it's her teaching the younger sisters how to do these kinds of things. And as she kept on her journey, though, later she did get more austere in her practices later on. I don't really know much about it, but I do think she had some self-flagellation, and she got into some interesting more austere practices later in her life. But she had great ecstasy. She also had great suffering, and she wanted to suffer for Jesus. And so that was her path. And later she was not prosecuted by the Spanish Inquisitors. She was able to get through and do her thing. And in the end, they actually made her a doctor of the church hundreds of years later.
Yeah.
So she's considered a doctor of the church, which is interesting. And she's Saint Teresa of Ávila, which is where she was from. So I don't want to get too much, but she's a fascinating person to read and study. I would love to, you could definitely do, like you said, a whole series just on her. So I don't want
Yeah.
to water anything down, but I just wanted to mention her as you look at the picture. And did you want to talk briefly about St. John of the Cross, and then we can open up for discussion?
Is she familiar with Marguerite?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Is she know?
It's 200-year difference, because
Yeah, maybe like
Margaret was 1300 and Teresa was 1500. So I don't know if she knew her writing.
Yeah, I think 300, yeah, like about 300 years difference.
Why was one, I mean, there's a difference in time, for sure, but why was one persecuted and why was one not?
Yeah.
The church was on a different campaign. Yeah, right, there was like, there was a shift back.
Really?
Yeah, it was becoming unpopular to be like annihilating all the women and all the, you know, there was a new, they would have had two popes in between, right? From 1300 to at least two popes, and so whoever the pope was, Teresa of Ávila was like active, like in College of Cardinals one, so like those superists, like they were kind of like following through on all the investigation they had started, but there wasn't like a big push for new ones when she was alive. There were still some people killed, but it wasn't as aggressive.
Yeah,
And if she's a doctor of the church, does that mean, that means that her writing is church doctrine, right? Like, so interior castles.
that's interesting. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know, but she was formally made a doctor of the church and declared a saint.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yes. So these are you.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So basically, the one's executed and the others made a doctor of the church. Like,
Yeah.
crazy. So it's an interesting comparison of the capricious nature of it all.
Yeah, and I suspect, I think this is true. Marguerite Perret talked in more radical ways. Her language and her declarations were more radical, and it troubled people. Yeah. But if it's okay, maybe we'll hold St. John of the Cross, and I'll maybe share like 5 minutes on St. Teresa.
Yeah.
Okay. Because she was St. John of the Cross's mentor and friend, and they collaborated. They were both Carmelite. They were in the Carmelite religious order. He's amazing. There's some passages from him here that we're not going to get to, but let me just share a couple of things on St. Teresa. That image from Bernini that's in Rome, Holly and I saw it when we went to Rome. It's an amazing sculpture. Depicts her ecstatic mysticism. And ecstatic mysticism is a version of mysticism that is powerfully emotional, where people are carried out of themselves, ecstatic, outside myself, into my deepest, truest self, namely God, outside my small separate self and into the great self. Sometimes ecstatic mysticism is contrasted with the mysticism of ordinary life, but it's a false dichotomy. Because I'll try to show you how from Teresa. She was deeply ecstatic, had these visionary experiences, but she brought it into everyday life. I will say that I ask you to look at her face. How did it appear? Is it anyone?
Well,
If we had more time, I'd give you a close up, but it's okay to say it out loud. What's that?
Very happy. Very happy.
I wish you could find a close. You can find a close up of her face.
she looks like she just had really great sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like she's having an orgasm.
Yeah.
And her description in her autobiography. I was going to ask if you find a bigger, like close up of her face. But her description of it in her autobiography is very like sexually charged. And it's also a spiritual vision. It's not like she's just, quote, having a sexual experience. She's having, it's a spiritual experience. And climactic for her. And I ask you to look where that arrow is pointing. It's not pointing to her heart. It's not pointing to her heart. Where's it pointing?
Woohoo! This is so scary.
It's pointing to her genitals. Now, I will say, this sculpture is made by a man. So who knows? But read her autobiography and hear her own description. Okay. So I want to put it in context. The sculpture is made by a man. All right.
She's hot for Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And if you take like a paper and line up the arrow, you'll see where it lands. So Saint Teresa, very briefly, she says the soul will not be content with anything less than God. Whoever has God lacks nothing. It would take a while to unpack this, but I think this is really important. There's a common human experience that we're haunted by a feeling of lack, like something's missing, something's a little bit off, something's not quite right, something's lacking. And as long as we're not really clear that we are always, already, absolutely united with God, there's going to be a feeling that something's missing, something's lacking. But we misinterpret what the lack is. We chronically misinterpret what the lack is. It feels like the lack is, oh, I need more money. Oh, I'm lacking enough time. Oh, I need a better relationship. Oh, I need a better computer or car, or, I need my kids to act differently than they actually do. Whatever it might be. We misinterpret the feeling of lack. But as long as we're identified as a small, separate self, there's always a lack, because we have a subtle sense of being cut off from the depths of life. So she says, the soul will not be content with anything less than God. I'm going to skip. I wish I had time to give this image that she gives of a drop of water becoming united with the ocean, but it's in here. This is really important. Here's the bridge from her ecstatic mysticism to her everyday life mysticism. So she invokes this teaching from Christ. Love God with all your heart and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. She says, on the spiritual path, the beloved, that's one of the names of God. On the spiritual path, the beloved asks only two things of him, of us. Ask only two things of us. By the way, what she's going to say, I think, is really, really funny and really, really profound, right? She had a great sense of humor, right? The beloved asks only two things of us, that we love him and that we love each other. Love God and love each other. The most reliable sign that we're following both of these teachings is that we're loving each other. Although we might have some clear indications that we're loving God, we can't really be sure. This is Saint Teresa saying. I mean, this is the woman that became a doctor of the church and a saint. I can't really be sure that I'm loving God, but I know whether I'm loving my neighbors or not. Yeah, isn't this great? We might have some clear indications that we're loving God. We can't really be sure that we are, but it's obvious whether or not we're loving each other. Doesn't that bring it down to earth? Isn't that awesome? Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
So I'm going to skip St. John of the Cross. Sorry, St. John. You've been a great inspiration. And I'd like to just talk us through just a very quick little meditation. Then we'll have like 15 minutes to have conversation, okay? So all the mystics say over and over that the deepest experience is ineffable, that the ultimate reality, whether we call it God or nature or life, that ultimate reality is ineffable. No word is adequate to God. And yet, all we have is metaphors. And these metaphors are not meant to represent some reality out there, but the metaphors are meant to spark an experience of realization, an experience of awakening. Okay, so here's a classic metaphor that actually came from ancient Greece, was taken up by many different Christian mystics, and it's one that works really well for me. So it's got two parts. The first part is God is a sphere whose circumference is nowhere. In other words, infinite. So first, just try to imagine a sphere that has no circumference, that's infinite. Now, I will say this is literally impossible to do. We can't conceive of infinity, but we can intuit it. Like, imagine a sphere that has no circumference. You can really feel that. Draw on your qigong, right? Really feel that. A sphere who has no circumference. Okay. The second part of this metaphor is God is a sphere whose circumference is nowhere and whose center is everywhere. Whose center is everywhere. Feel that. The center of God is everywhere. And really make that real for yourself. What if that was a true statement? It actually is. The center of God is everywhere. Now, if we could have just maybe shift back to conversation for just like a couple of moments. So, will someone show me the center of God?
You're looking at it.
What's that?
You're looking at it.
I am looking at it. That's right. I am looking at it. Right. But be more specific.
It's everything.
It is everything. Can I ask you to be more specific? Where is the center of God?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Everywhere, everyone.
Everywhere, everyone. What if you made that even more intimate?
Right there. Right there. And right there. And right there. And right there.
Yes. Yeah. Julie pointed at it too. Right. And Amy. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the plant and the clock and our neighbor. I think for most people, it's easier to say, oh yeah, the center is there, or there, or there. So, and that's really important. That's in a way the end point. At the same time, I think it's really very important to be able to say to yourself, I'm the center. Don't leave yourself out.
Isn't that what Marguerite Loretto is saying? I am God, says love, for love is God, and God is love.
Yes,
That's what she's saying.
that's what she's saying. That's exactly what she's saying.
The God is a sphere with no circumference and the center is everywhere. That's also like we're familiar with it as a way chi.
Yeah,
That's right.
I love that.
We can intuit it. And if we can feel it really, really intimate in our individuals and feel it really, really intimate in each and every other, then that flow happens naturally. Not because the 10 Commandments tell you to do it, not because there's moral sort of prohibitions and advocacy. No, you spontaneously know. Love flows freely when you see that.
It's beautiful.
So that's plenty for
Wow.
a conversation. So.
That was awesome. Thank you. Woo, it's a lot to digest, isn't it? In our little hour together. Well, we have a little time now. Thank you so much for bringing that to us, Will, and for your expertise on this subject. I'm humbled that you took the time and came here every week to be here, and it was a beautiful, amazing class, and I'm super grateful for you.
It's mutual. Yeah, thank you.
But I do want to hear from you all. We have about 17 minutes, and I think that's a little bit of time we can discuss. So again, I just want to hear from you all, since this is something that we took a chance on. We've never done anything like this here at Green Heiress. What did you get by coming to this class, even if it was once or it was all 6 times? What was what's your biggest takeaway? What have you learned? What have you incorporated into your everyday life? What's something that you would want to see next? So those are some of the questions I would like to hear from you about. Would anybody like to volunteer to go first?
So when I came and you were talking about the mistakes, we were talking about signs from that make us realize that things are better than we think they are, and that there's signs to remind us how blessed we are. And as dealing with my mom in Naples, as you know, and it was a hard day, and then I saw 2 rainbows and 7 bunnies. Oh, we happened to be in Naples, so this neighborhood had all these bunnies, and I love bunnies. And it completely struck me that what I had learned that day, that everything's going to keep going, it's going to be fine, it's going to all work out, and this is the sign. So it was very beautiful.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I would have picked up on that in my space had I not heard and been here for that meditation. So
Well, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. And that's some practice that you can continue to do. And I feel like the more you recognize that kind of thing, the more it happens. Right? Like the more like, oh my gosh, that rainbow, that frog, that whatever, like that's my sign today. Very much so.
Yeah, and broken ankles and cancer and the war in Gaza and ecological desecration. That's it too. Marguerite Perret knew that she was completely well while she was being burned at the stake. She knew that she could die and still be well. And this is a possibility for us.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I have a very busy list. And these practices and these teachings just remind me to be still, just be still. And know that it's all going to be down.
Yep.
Because it's bigger than me. And we're
Yep.
always connected. Whether you call it divine, God, the universe, the cosmos, like it's here to serve us. You remember.
Mhm.
This helps us to remember its practices. It really does. It grounds us and it keeps us.
Is there any particular practice that you like the most or that you've tried?
I haven't been to all of them, all of the sessions, but I would say just I've been walking a lot in nature and just really looking for the signs.
Mhm.
The frogs, the rainbows, the robins, like robins are in my spirit, butterflies. It's like every time I have a connection with my grand through butterflies, and I know that I'm in the right place when I see one. I've had a weird thing happen on Sunday. Yes, yesterday was Sunday. Yes, it was. And I had to go and see a client. I work with seniors at Mercy. It was very late in the day. I wasn't expecting it. She had had a fall, doesn't have family in the area. And I was a little irritated that I had to get out of my pool and go there. And 3 butterflies, like simultaneously, like, "Shh," they're like, go, that's where you're supposed to be. So just think it was the reminder, it was the sign. This is, yes. So just paying attention and knowing that we're connected. It's really, really important. Thank you for doing this. It's important to know that this recognition to our connection has been going on. Yes, so.
Thank you. It's always great to see you here.
Mhm.
Always great to hear. Hear.
Anybody else? Wyatt?
I was away facilitating a retreat in New York. And I talk to people all the time about the knowing, and the knowing. And the tool that you gave us of reading a passage 4 times and letting it sink into our heart came to me, and I used that with a couple of people during the retreat, allowing these things to sink down in so that it got through their knowing to their knowing,
Mhm.
and into their knowing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That really touches my heart. And was that nice for that?
Yeah. Yeah. A therapist came up to me towards the end of the retreat and said, you know, I saw so and so before your session, and he was a different person.
Wow, so it's those little
Wonderful.
things, right? But thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. That's what it's all about. We learn from each other. One of my favorite moments was when Wendy was like, I can't remember what it was. Or like, well, okay, I won't judge anybody anymore. Oh, weird.
Talking about loving the neighbors, loving everyone.
Okay.
It's all hard. It's really hard.
It's really hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
But again, this is helping me to, it's a reminder, we're all connected.
I think that was like the Thomas Burton one when he saw the light. Every single person he was standing on
Yes.
you said the streets, Jeff. What were they? They were Walnut and
Walnut and center of the universe for me.
yeah, and you
Growing up as when I met you when I was in my 20s.
yeah, you related to John. You related to
South
Thomas.
Lake, thank you. Walnut, South Lake, that was. Yeah, very good.
So yes, there was an excerpt in the week we do with Thomas Burton where he walks in town on. He's just a monk coming down to town, Walnut, and I don't remember the others.
And we were, the context behind it was we were in Chautauqua, as Erica mentioned. That's kind of the place that we go to, and I tell her it's kind of like time freezes. Everything just kind of gets really still. And like as we get older, life seems to go by so quickly with kids and grandkids. And I was reflecting on the class with Thomas Burton, and that's when we saw a frog in the pond. But then also we were in a kind of the very central place in Chautauqua in the Institute, where all the hubbub was, and I was saying that's kind of the center of the universe here in Chautauqua, and I was relating it to my experience in my 20s growing up in Pittsburgh. And so, yeah, that was a way that I could incorporate what we learned here into my day-to-day life.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that because that was the moment that Thomas Burton looked around and he said, I see everybody's light. Every single person has light, God's light, divine light, everyone, all. I wish I could see, they can see how much they are all shining. Does anybody remember that? And that is so beautiful.
I really appreciate how this series has coincided with the fire season Qigong class. There have been so many connections to make between what we've been doing in class and learning in class and what we've been doing in this class.
thank you for bringing that up because I talked to Susan about that. And it's not like we sat down and did a curriculum program, but it just kind of worked out that way because this is the fire summit. We did talk a lot about fire and being a transformative energy and love and the heart. And there were so many connections.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up. It did really work out beautifully that way. Anybody else want to share? We still have a few more minutes. Okay, what I would like to then ask you in the last few minutes, what would you all, anybody like to see us continue maybe in the fall, some kind of, we follow up on this. What would you like to see? Would you like to go more in depth with one or two mystics? Would you like to continue what we're doing? What's some of your ideas? I'd like to hear.
I just want to share, like what's been, what I've enjoyed.
Oh, okay, yes, please do, Leanne.
The Lexio Divina has been like an interesting like addition to my practice.
Oh,
Just because I love reading aloud. So it kind of like plays on that. So that's been a helpful and sort of like part of when I need practice during a very difficult time in my life. And also like 'cause today I was not having a great time. It's an anniversary of a big loss for me. And so I sat with my feet on the ground in that and I was listening to like chakra attunement music and just trying to stay with myself. And so I was using the center prayer because I picked my word in that class and it just stuck. And so
wow.
I've taken myself to some like to St. Paul's in Oakland and just sat in front of the Virgin.
Oh, one thing.
So the centering prayer has been really kind of revolutionary to my mind and like well timed. So that's like
So I'm so grateful.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Very real.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I appreciate hearing that. How much that's been a blessing to you. And that's a blessing to me that you felt like that helped you and integrated in your path. It's amazing. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to either share or say something they'd like to see? Brandon?
I just like the piece that surpasses all understandings. Just feels very strong because it's like, regardless of any circumstance, whether painful or anything, there's something inside of you that can't be damaged.
Mhm.
So beautiful. That's
You're right, Brandon. This is a piece that's not contingent on favorable conditions. And we live our life as if we could acquire those favorable conditions and then we could be peaceful or then we could be happy. And if we live that way, our happiness is always deferred.
And so
It's a bitter bargain. Until I get that. That's the lack project that can't be fulfilled. Until we realize there's nothing lacking. Absolutely nothing lacking. What a wonder. Of course, we forget. And our practice is what gets in the way of us remembering again and again and again.
All right. Well, 5 minutes passed, so thank you all so much. Take some food out there
Thank
now.
you guys are wonderful.
Thank you. And we hope to see you in the fall.